So first question is, in Iran, in your own culture, what is expected from a secretary or other supporting staff? So what would you expect a secretary to do for you?
Well, that is a difficult question because depends on how you look at it. So if you are a kind of boss in a department or in an organization or any institute, then the secretary is like someone who is basically your personal servant, in which she tries to deal with all kind of calendar appointments that you have. She is preparing tea or coffee for you. She is making copies or printing for you, and all kind of this low level of activities are expected from a secretary.
You have to be very humble, and also you need to just receive a lot of bad treatment or things that you don't want, or kind of be like a slave, like a modern slave, I would say.
Our culture or international employees would expect from a secretary would also be faster reaction. But then again, because of they also have their own schedule or responsibility, so there will not always be a fast reaction. For instance, if I send an email now and then the secretary can easily say, I will come back to you in my next working day, which is 2 days later. So I think it's very nice that at the beginning, this can be made clear to everyone in the department.
And do you see many differences with a secretary in the Netherlands in this regard?
Definitely, and that is also because when I came here, it was a kind of cultural shock for me. I dealt with all kind of different activities from secretaries and supporting staff when I was in Iran, but here, what shocked me most was that sometimes the secretary or supporting staff has a very strong voice. I mean, in the department, in the group, in the institute, and this is not the case in Iran. Here, for example, if they say, okay, this is it, then I know that this is it, and I cannot change it, and I cannot go to the boss or say, okay, I want to do it, and normally they say, just go on with what the secretaries and supporting staff tell you to do, and that's it. But in Iran, they are not of those kind of human resources that can make such decisions.
They are properly giving the value to the person in a position like this, as a secretary or as a supporting staff, even when you think that is not important, but it's important. And here in the Netherlands, they take that into account.
Whereas in our culture, if someone is free, then you can just communicate. You don't have to first send an email and make sure that you have specific time reserved for you. So like there is a bit of spontaneous and informal communication here than I have noticed in the Netherlands. But this, from my experience in both places, each one has its own advantage. For instance, in the Netherlands, you have to first have an appointment through email, and then time is reserved for you. And that's the time for you, and the person who works with you can do the job in that time. So that's the good part. The advantage in our culture of talking to someone without an appointment is like it's more informal and more friendly.
say something went really wrong with the secretary, so she didn't do a task properly or not in time. How would you react?
I've had it a tiny bit because I don't know if it was secretary, but I needed an account for the computer cluster.
Yeah.
And the first day I started working, my supervisor asked the person in charge to make the account for me. And then it took maybe 2 weeks for it to be done. And 2 weeks and several emails.
Yeah.
And I really needed it to start working, so that was not the best.
You wouldn't be angry or...
I could be frustrated. I don't think angry, but frustrated, I think.
Yeah. And how would you show your frustration?
I think I'm a very calm person, so I don't think I would show it too much. Maybe I could complain to other colleagues, like, oh, I really needed the account, but now I cannot do anything, like saying things like that. I could see myself doing.
What kind of tip would you give to the secretary and the supporting staff here? Say if they're dealing with a person coming from Ethiopia, say he's coming here for the first time. So what kind of tip would you give to the supporting staff and the secretary?
If someone new from Ethiopia comes, then people expect that others will understand their situation even without explaining it. That's something. So our friends who went to the Netherlands first, they had to tell us that you have to ask for what you need. Otherwise, you don't expect people to understand your situation without, telling them. We have the tendency that people would know what I need. I came from Ethiopia. I don't live here, so they should know. There is this kind of expectation.
So what a secretary definitely shouldn't do is to kick the ball to others, because I know that, for instance, the Netherlands, the responsibilities are very clearly divided, but especially for internationals, that they would expect the secretaries to be the know-all kind of person, to actually connect them with the relevant departments or people.
There's one thing that I feel like is lacking in my from my experience is that there's very little guidelines, like black and white guidelines in this university for certain things, like how do we do our project hours, how do we do our claims, exactly how do we do if you want to do, for example, a purchase from or order an experiment. Send out an experiment to another company. These kind of things are not really black and white, and it's difficult. So I struggle to even know what are the things to actually check, like my HR, or is it my project? Where do I put my claims in? This kind of things. There's no such guideline. Everything I have to go up to them and ask. I didn't really know when is the public holidays also. Then there's because I heard that there's different public holidays, not like and different from university. So these were not verbalized properly, and we are assumed we have to know it somehow, that the university have a holidays differently from a public one. The starting document that actually helps has a bit more information would be nice. For people from international countries, coming from.
I would suggest them to know what are the most dominant culture in their own group. For example, in our own group, it's after Dutch, I think it's Iranian as far as I know. Yeah. So they know their culture, and they don't get upset if something goes wrong. First, they need to explore the cultural background, and if something goes wrong, so first, discover whether this is a cultural thing or not. And quite, a lot of times, the things that we do, and we, when we deal with the secretaries and supporting staff, we have this cultural background in our mind, and we treat this, supporting staff like, secretaries that are in our service under any circumstance. But So this is not the case, and I hope the secretaries and supporting staff would understand this. And so far, to be honest, they have been quite understanding, and they have